The moment I saw her standing
that's
by the
cold.
glass wall of the
You
office,
love it.
sunlight spilling
Okay,
over
thank
her
you.
like a quiet accusation, I knew something was wrong. She wasn't dressed for meetings or deadlines or another long day of decisions. She was dressed for a date. And before I could stop myself, before logic or fear could step in, the thought burned through me with a painful clarity. She was walking toward a life that didn't include me, and I was about to lose more than just my boss. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the strange ways hearts find courage in ordinary places, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. Her name was Arwen Hale, and she had built a reputation in our firm as someone unbreakable. People whispered about her efficiency the way others spoke of storms or machines, something powerful and slightly frightening. To me, she was the woman who arrived before everyone else, sleeves rolled, hair tied back, carrying the weight of a company on her shoulders as if it were nothing. I was just Jonah Reed, her operations manager, the one who fixed the small fires so she could face the big ones. We worked side by side for 3 years, long enough for her coffee habits to become familiar, long enough for the silences between us to grow comfortable, and long enough for me to fall in love with her in a way that never felt allowed. That morning, the office was bright in that clean, hopeful way daylight has before it learns what the day will demand. Phones hadn't started ringing yet, and the city outside looked gentle through the windows. Arwen stood there in a soft blue dress, her hair loose, her face lighter than I'd ever seen it. She looked like someone who had stepped out of her own life for a moment. The sight of her like that hurt more than I expected, because it showed me a version of her I wasn't part of. I tried to focus on my work, but the numbers on the screen blurred into meaninglessness. My mind kept circling the same thought, sharp and persistent. Why today? Why now? The rumors had floated around before, polite suggestions from investors that she should network more, smile more, soften her edges. Maybe this was that. Maybe she was finally giving in to the idea that her worth needed to be approved over candlelit tables and expensive menus. Arwen moved through the office with a different rhythm that day. She paused at windows, straightened things that didn't need straightening, checked her reflection in the dark screen of a powered-down monitor. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed unsure. That realization shifted something in me. The woman everyone thought was made of steel was quietly trembling under the surface. The challenge I faced wasn't professional, it was personal and terrifying. I had spent years building a careful distance, telling myself respect mattered more than desire, that my job was to support her vision, not complicate her life. But watching her prepare to leave for a world where she might shrink herself to fit someone else's expectations felt unbearable. I struggled with the knowledge that speaking up could cost me everything I'd built, while staying silent might cost me something I'd never admit I wanted. As noon approached, the office filled with the usual noise, but I felt suspended in a different time. Memories crept in uninvited. Late afternoons when we stayed back solving crises, the way she trusted my judgment without question, the rare moments she laughed freely when something absurd cut through the stress. Those moments had convinced me she was more than the role she played, and that I mattered to her in ways that didn't fit neatly into a job description. Daylight streamed stronger through the windows as the hours passed, as if the world itself were urging clarity. Arwen finally stepped into her office and closed the door, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I wrestled with fear, with the possibility of rejection, with the knowledge that timing is cruel and courage often arrives late. But sometimes, I realized, courage arrives exactly when it's needed, even if it shakes your hands while it does. When she emerged again, keys in hand, her expression was determined but brittle. This was it. The moment where the paths split. I stood up before my mind could talk me out of it. The words formed not as a speech but as a truth that had been waiting too long. I told her she wasn't a French restaurant woman, not because she couldn't belong there, but because she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I told her to stay, not as an order, but as an invitation to choose herself. The air between us felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. She looked at me then, really looked, as if seeing me beyond my role for the first time. The silence stretched, filled with the distant hum of the city and the soft certainty of daylight holding steady outside. Arwen's struggle showed on her face. Years of expectations pressed against years of self-denial. She had built walls so high that even she couldn't see over them anymore. The challenge she faced wasn't about a date or an outfit, it was about deciding whether she could exist without constantly performing strength for others. I watched her weigh the safety of the familiar against the risk of vulnerability, and I felt exposed standing there, offering something real with no guarantee it would be accepted. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she set her keys down slowly, as if afraid that a sudden movement might shatter something delicate. The office around us seemed to fade, replaced by the simple truth of two people standing in daylight, deciding what mattered. I realized then that even if she walked away, speaking up had already changed me. I had stepped out of my own fear, and that mattered. What happened next wasn't dramatic in the way movies promise. There was no sweeping gesture, no sudden confession. There was just a quiet shift. Arwen sat down, her shoulders relaxing for the first time all day. She admitted, not in words but in presence, that she was tired. Tired of being impressive, tired of being alone in rooms full of people, tired of dressing for expectations that didn't feel like her own. From that day forward, things changed in subtle but profound ways. We began taking lunch breaks together outside the office, letting daylight and noise replace fluorescent lights and tension. Conversations deepened, moving beyond tasks and targets into dreams and regrets. I learned about the pressure she felt growing up, the belief that love was conditional on achievement. She learned about my own quiet fears, the way I'd hidden behind competence to avoid rejection. The suspense wasn't whether we would cross a professional line, but whether we could navigate honesty without destroying what we had built. The days that followed were careful, full of unspoken understanding and small acts of trust. We set boundaries, respected the gravity of our roles, and allowed something gentler to grow alongside our work. Daytime became our shared space of transformation. Morning light found us planning not just strategies but balance. Afternoon sun caught us smiling more easily, tension loosening its grip. The office, once a place of pressure, began to feel human. Others noticed the change in Arwen. She led with the same intelligence, but with a softness that didn't diminish her authority. If anything, it made her stronger. The greatest challenge came not from within, but from outside. Investors questioned her focus, colleagues whispered about favoritism, and old doubts resurfaced. There were days she pulled back, afraid she had revealed too much. There were days I wondered if loving her meant standing in the shadow of her ambitions forever. But each time uncertainty threatened to pull us apart, we returned to the simple truth that daylight had revealed. Neither of us needed to become smaller to be together. As time passed, Arwen canceled the date that had started it all. Not out of defiance, but out of clarity. She chose honesty over performance, connection over expectation. Watching her reclaim that choice inspired me in ways I hadn't expected. It reminded me that love doesn't always arrive as a dramatic entrance, sometimes it arrives as permission to stay exactly where you are. The story didn't end with a grand declaration. It ended with something quieter and more powerful. One afternoon, sunlight pouring through the office windows, Arwen thanked me for seeing her when she'd forgotten how to see herself. In that moment, I understood that being loved isn't about being chosen over others, but about being recognized fully. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you of a moment when someone saw you or you wished you'd spoken up, please take a second to like this video, comment your thoughts, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive. Before the ending, here's a special request. Comment the word, stay, if you believe the bravest thing a person can do is choose themselves in the daylight, without hiding. Life continued, as it always does, with meetings and deadlines and unexpected challenges. But something fundamental had shifted. Arwen no longer dressed for who she was supposed to be. I no longer hid behind professionalism to avoid vulnerability. Together, we learned that the most cinematic moments don't always happen under moonlight or in dramatic settings. Sometimes, they happen in broad daylight, in an office filled with ordinary sounds, when someone finally finds the courage to say what their heart has been whispering all along. And that, more than any date or destination, was the moment that changed everything.